Where are my sons? Kirin shouted as she dragged the shirt of Jaki, her husband. He pulled her away slightly and sat on one of the chairs, his head buried in his palms. Kirin pressed her face against the glass window, sobbing slightly and watching the empty street below as the rain poured down that evening. The morning sun cast long shadows as Kirin swept her small compound. Her wrapper, though faded from countless washes, was tied neatly around her waist. Inside the house, her 10-year-old son, Romeo, was already dressed for school, helping his 5-year-old brother, Jude, with his buttons. Jaki, her husband, usually leaves before dawn with his 24-seater bus to the motor park where he worked as a driver. Kirin's boys were her world, the reason she endured what others couldn't understand. People in the village often whispered about how a woman like Kirin, beautiful, hardworking, and wise beyond her years, had ended up with Jaki. The truth was, Jaki hadn't always been this way. When they first married, he worked hard then and spoke of building a better life for their family. But the dream of quick money poisoned his mind. Gambling had become his second wife, one that demanded more attention and resources than Kirin and the boys combined. While Kirin was lost in thought, Jaki walked in, looking tired and angry. "Good morning," she greeted him. She had learned not to ask too many questions in the morning. Jaki's mood was often unpredictable, especially when he had spent the previous evening at the gambling house. "Morning," he grunted, walking past her without his usual attempt at charm. Kirin quietly went into the kitchen to prepare breakfast of yam and eggs. The sound of sizzling oil was interrupted by Jaki's voice from the sitting room. "Kirin, I need some money." "For what?" Just some money, I'll pay you back." The conversation was familiar. Kirin knew where the money would go, just as she knew he would never pay it back. Still, she reached into her wrapper and brought out some crumpled naira notes. Jaki took the money without thanks and left immediately. Kirin was troubled. Jaki's gambling had grown worse in recent months. There had been nights when he came home with torn clothes and bruises, evidence of debts he couldn't pay, and creditors who had lost patience. She had stopped asking questions because the truth was always worse than what he told her. One evening, as Kirin mended a torn shirt, she noticed that it's been a while since she saw Jaki's boss. "Jaki," she called, "why haven't you been bringing your boss home?" "Wait, don't tell me you're packing it elsewhere so I don't know when you return." Jaki paused, his hand frozen on the door frame. The boss is at the mechanics," he said, scratching his head. Just minor engine problems. It should be fixed in a few days." Kirin nodded and continued with her chore. 2 days later, while returning from work, Kirin was hurrying to catch a bus when she spotted a familiar figure hanging from the door of a red bus, calling out stops and collecting money from passengers. It was Jaki, working as a conductor instead of a driver. If Jaki was working as a conductor, where was his boss? The answer came to her with crushing certainty. He had gambled it away. That evening, Jaki returned to find Kirin at the small table, busy picking beans. I'm sorry," he began. I gambled the boss away, but I'll get it back before the month ends." Kirin remained quiet and kept picking beans. "Don't you have anything to say?" he asked. Kirin looked up at him and said, "Jude, please come and help me take these beans inside." The weeks that followed were harder than any Kirin had experienced in their 8 years of marriage. Without the boss, Jaki's income was cut to a fraction of what it had been. He worked as a conductor for other drivers, taking a small percentage of daily earnings that barely covered his own transport and food. The burden of supporting the family fell entirely on Kirin's shoulders. The cruelest part was Jaki's continued gambling. Kirin began hiding her earnings better, but somehow, small amounts would still disappear. She knew Jaki was taking them, but she also knew that confronting him would only lead to lies and arguments that would disturb the boys. Kirin was preparing breakfast when Jaki emerged from their bedroom, already dressed and looking unusually alert for someone who had stumbled home drunk the night before. "I'll take the boys to school today," he announced, reaching for his car keys. Kirin looked up in surprise. You will? Wow, I'm so grateful, she said, forcing brightness into her voice. Maybe you're changing after all. Jackie only smiled at her as he led the boys out of the compound. The afternoon stretched endlessly as Kirin waited for Romeo and Jude to return from school. At first, she wasn't worried, but as the hours passed and darkness began to fall, she became scared. She began asking neighbors if they had seen them, but no one had. Jackie returned that night looking downcast. He sat heavily in his chair and put his head in his hands. Jackie, where are my boys? Kirin asked. Jackie was silent for a while before he said, They are lost. I can't even explain. Right in front of me. I tried to fight, but there are too many of them. They beat me and took the boys. I've been searching everywhere, asking everyone, but the next few weeks were a blur of grief and frantic searching. Kirin reported the kidnapping to the local police. She barely slept and ate and kept asking everyone if they had seen her sons. Days turned into weeks turned into months, still no word from the kidnappers, no ransom demand, no sign of her boys. 2 months after the boys' disappearance, Jaki came home with news. I bought a new bus, he announced, keys jingling in his hand. Business is going to be good again, Kirin. I'm so happy. Kirin looked at the keys, then at her husband's face. Where did you get the money for your bus? I told you gambling pays, but you never believed. I won this time. The lie was so transparent that Kirin almost laughed. Instead, she turned back to her cooking and said nothing. Jaki began to flaunt money again. He bought Kirin expensive wrappers and jewelries and gifts. Then one day he said, maybe we should try to have other children. It might help us heal from losing the boys. Kirin agreed, partly because she desperately wanted children again too. But each pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, as if her body knew that bringing new children into this situation would be wrong. 2 years passed. Kirin had learned to live with her grief. Then one day, Jaki brought home a second wife. The woman was young, maybe 20 years old, with the kind of naive beauty that men like Jaki found irresistible. Her name was Ngozi and she was pregnant. This is my wife, Jaki announced to Kirin as casually as he might introduce a new neighbor. Kirin looked at the girl and felt something between pity and rage. Ngozi avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but too dependent on Jaki to protest. For several weeks, the three of them lived together. Kirin endured still, waiting for Jaki to come to his senses. The end came on a rainy Thursday evening. Kirin was returning from work when she saw her belongings piled outside their gate, already soaked in the downpour. Jaki emerged from the house as Kirin approached. His face was hard, devoid of any trace of the man she had once loved. I don't want you here anymore, he said loudly. Jaki, what's come over you? If there's any problem, we can work this out now. Why will you go to this extent? No, I don't trust you anymore. Something about you has changed since we lost the boys. I need peace. I need peace for my new wife. Please, leave. Jaki, please. Okay, just let me stay for tonight. It's raining and I have nowhere to go. Well, that's not my problem anymore. He went back inside and shut the door firmly. Kirin stood in the rain, looking at her soggy belongings. She gathered what she could carry and walked through the rain to her friend Chigo's house on the other side of the village. Chigo opened the door immediately and pulled Kirin inside, wrapping her in a warm wrapper and setting her by the fire. If only you had listened to me and left that loser earlier. No, look how he has put you to shame, Chigo said angrily. But as she looked at her friend's face, Chigo was surprised to see that Kirin didn't look devastated as she thought. If anything, she looked relieved. So, what will you do now? Chigo asked. I don't know, Chigo, Kirin replied. Chigo smiled. You, Kirin, I beg. You always know what to do. You just don't want to tell me yet. The next morning, Kirin left Chigo's house. She made her way to the wealthy part of town, where the big houses sat behind high gates and well-maintained gardens. She had been here many times as a cleaner, but today she was here for a different reason. The house she sought belonged to Ojoma, a wealthy businessman who had lost his wife and young son in a plane crash 5 years earlier. Kirin had claimed his house when he first moved to the area, and he had made it clear that he was interested in marrying her. But she had always refused his advances, politely choosing to remain faithful to Jaki. Kirin pretended to believe her husband. She knew when he wanted to sell their sons, and she immediately pleaded with Ojoma to help her by buying the boys at a higher price from her husband so she doesn't lose them. Ojoma agreed, as he was happy to even raise them as his sons. So she only played along so Jaki would suspect nothing. It had been the hardest decision of her life. When watching Jaki's descent into gambling addiction and moral bankruptcy, she knew it was the right one. Now, 2 years later, she stood at Ojoma's gate, ready to claim her sons. The gatekeeper recognized her and immediately let her in. Her boys were playing in the garden and they looked wonderful. They had grown so much in 2 years. When they saw her, their reactions broke her heart. Kirin knelt down and opened her arms for an embrace. "Where have you been, Mommy?" Jude asked. Ojoma appeared on the veranda, watching the reunion with a gentle smile. Over the following hours, Ojoma and Kirin talked privately. He explained how he had cared for the boys, the schools they attended, the activities they enjoyed, and how he had handled their questions about their parents. Ojoma cleared his throat and smiled. "Kirin, you do know my offer to you is still open, right? We could be a family, all four of us. I've grown to love these boys as my own sons, and I still care deeply for you." Ojoma, let me think about it. For now, can we just live together here, the boys and me? I need some time to heal, and they need time to adjust to having their mother back. Ojoma agreed immediately. 6 months after her arrival, Kirin agreed to marry him. One night, as they discussed, Ojoma made a confession that stunned Kirin. "When Jaki threw you out, that wasn't entirely his idea. I encouraged it." Kirin sat up quickly. "What are you talking about?" Ojoma sighed heavily. I paid him to divorce you and send you away. That was selfish, but I also wanted the best for you, as I could not bear it when I heard you were living with his second wife. I'm so sorry. I was just trying to help. By lying to me, by manipulating my husband into abandoning me, by making me an object of mockery. They argued late into the night, their voices carrying through the house despite their attempts to keep quiet. One evening, days later, Kirin found Ojoma sitting alone on the veranda. Then she said, "You were wrong to manipulate the situation. But I get your point, and I forgive you." They sat in silence for a moment, but their reconciliation was interrupted by a groan from Ojoma. "What's wrong?" Kirin asked, looking worried. Just give me a moment," Ojoma gasped, pressing his hand to his chest. The pain seemed to pass, but Kirin insisted on calling his doctor. Dr. Nnamdi arrived the next morning and examined Ojoma privately. When he emerged from the bedroom, his expression was grave. "The cancer has progressed faster than we anticipated. We thought he had 6 months when we first diagnosed it last year. But now, I don't think he has more than a month." "Cancer? What cancer? He never told me he was sick," Kirin said, looking alarmed. "Well, he didn't want to bother you or the children." That night, after the boys were asleep, Kirin sat by Ojoma's bedside and cried. All her anger dissolved into grief and regret. "I'm so sorry I wasted so much time being angry at you when I should have been grateful." You have nothing to be sorry for. These months with you and the boys have been the happiest of my life since I lost my wife and family. The final month passed too quickly. Ojoma grew weaker, but remained conscious and present for as much as possible. He updated his will to ensure that everything he owned went to Kirin and the boys. He died peacefully on a Sunday morning, with Kirin holding his hand. In the months following Ojoma's death, Kirin focused on building a stable life for her sons. The inheritance he had left them ensured they would never want for anything. As she tucked Jude into his bed and kissed Romeo goodnight, Kirin whispered a prayer of gratitude for Ojoma's love, for her children's health and happiness, and for the journey that had brought them all home.